Guys, I hope that you are doing well. I am not too happy today. I just appeared before a parliamentary committee last night, and I want to tell you what happened because it was really wrong how I was treated. And look, I am not a victim. I can handle myself, but I think my experience is something that we should keep in mind when the Trudeau federal government lectures people about creating division, because that is exactly what they did with me. The committee was the Heritage Committee, and the question that had been presented to the expert witnesses like me who had been called to give testimony, the question was kind of a funny one. It was the means government should have at its disposal to ensure the exercise of freedom of expression. And I made my remarks essentially saying that the government doesn't need more means, the government needs to do less, that throughout human history, it is governments that have censored speech that they don't like, and that this current federal government is no different, that bills C11, C18, C63, which are the Online Harms Act, the Online News Act, and the Online Streaming Act, that these are all censorious pieces of legislation. And I explained that this is an issue for all governments of every partisan stripe. As long as we have had governments, they have tried to silence speech that they don't like. This is not a partisan issue. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech is a value for every single Canadian. It is not an issue for the left. It is not an issue for the right. It is for everyone. And free speech is actually most important for those who are in minorities, either a minority in viewpoint or a minority in some immutable characteristic, because free speech is how we define the contours of all of our other rights. I will post a link to my full remarks on all of that separately, but that's not actually what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk about how I was treated by the Liberal MP on the committee. So I showed up in absolute good faith to talk about freedom of expression. I litigate on this issue. We are one of the largest civil liberties organizations in Canada. I have a new book coming out in early December about free speech and the fascinating history of that right. It goes back to ancient days and up to the modern challenges we face now safeguarding this sacred right. But instead of wanting to be curious and ask me about all of that, the Liberal MP, for some reason, wanted to use his time to make the most unconnected, bizarre, and partisan attacks against me personally imaginable. So let's go through some of them. I was asked about a proposed Niqab ban from the Harper government. Here is that exchange.
Do you think that a woman should be able to wear a niqab?
Of course I do.
Do you think that it was inappropriate for the Conservative government to put forward in the last time that Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, do you think it was inappropriate for them to put forward a niqab ban on women?
I don't have comment on that. I'm not familiar.
No, but I'm not asking you. So, okay. So you're not familiar with the proposed niqab ban?
I do not think that government should ban religious clothing.
So you do not think that government should ever ban religious clothing, correct?
I do not think they should.
Okay.
The Quebec government is doing that now.
So I hardly remember anything about this Harper era proposal. It was from about 10 years ago and obviously a different government. So it also never happened. This is not a live issue. Although the ban on religious clothing is a live issue in Quebec because of Bill 21, and that's something that we have publicly opposed. I could have answered this MP's questions about that. And in fact, if you can see in this exchange, I kind of try to, but the member was not interested in that. He was interested in attacking a government from 2006. So strange behavior. I mean, the idea that this MP was asking about a proposed and unimplemented policy of a long ago government is just a waste of everyone's time. The weirdest exchange was he asked me to give my personal opinion on abortion, which isn't even a free expression issue, I guess, except to the extent that there are restrictions on protesting abortion. But he was not interested in that issue. So here's that exchange.
Do you believe in a woman's right to choose?
Of course I do.
Do you think that is it
to choose how to access healthcare? You mean like to choose
whether or not she can get an abortion?
Yes, that's my personal viewpoint.
Fantastic.
I do believe
does it concern you? Does it concern you that conservative governments in certain provinces, and does it concern you that members of the Conservative Party are seeking to legislate eliminating or taking away a woman's right to choose?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
I'm asking you specifically if a conservative.
We're talking about abortion right now.
I'm asking you because I'm asking you if you believe in that freedom.
That is what the connection is.
I'm asking you if you
Mr.
believe
Speaker,
in
point
that
of order
freedom.
here. What's the relevance to this?
So I really don't know what this MP is trying to do here. I think, thinks that this is some type of gotcha politics. I was actually initially confused by the question entirely. I didn't even know what he was asking me. Look, in retrospect, I think I probably should have not answered the question because my personal opinion on this topic is really not relevant to the work I do at the CCF or my testimony or the issue before the committee. Although if I had said something like my personal opinion is not relevant, I'm sure he would try to use that against me somehow. So I'm sure that he's deeply disappointed that I think abortion is legal and a healthcare service in this country, even though I respect the opinions of people who have moral problems with abortion. And the thing is that his government does not respect this difference of opinion, which is why they are trying to demonize anyone who has a different point of view, why they are trying to revoke the charitable status of crisis pregnancy centers, which shows the whole issue that this government has with censorship, which was the issue that we were here to talk about. It's a little bit hard to hear in the clip because this MP keeps talking over me, but I do tell him his polls must be looking really bad if he wants to turn this into a conversation about abortion. And I think that that's really what this exchange was all about. It was, the people rely on the work of the CCF to criticize some of the legislation that this government has opposed. So let's do a gotcha and ask Christine about abortion. It was bizarre. I was also asked weirdly about using the N word. Here is that clip.
Should I be able to describe black people using the N word?
I don't think that you should describe black people using these.
But should I be allowed to?
I don't. The current law permits you to do that.
And okay.
That's a statement of the law. That is a statement of the law right now.
But do you consider that hate
would
speech?
Never talk that way, and I don't think you would either.
I certainly would not. I certainly would not.
So this is weird. I think you might be able to hear it in the video, but people are gasping in the committee room when I say that it is legal to use the N-word. I don't even know why they are shocked. Like, we are not putting people in jail for using this word, even though I would never use that word, and I think that it is not a good thing to say. Where is he even going with this? Is his government saying they want to criminalize that word? They aren't doing that in C63, but is he suggesting that maybe they should? I mean, that would criminalize a lot of music. Is that what they want to do? Because that is really troubling. He also wanted to talk about transgender kids. Again, I just don't know how this is a freedom of expression issue. I don't think there are any government policies or laws in Canada telling trans people they can't express themselves through how they dress or what they want to call themselves. And to the extent that there is proposed legislation on trans issues or trans kids, they relate to medical interventions like pharmaceuticals and surgeries and perhaps pronoun use and the informing of parents at school. Those are the current live issues on transgender kids in Canada. And these are just not freedom of expression issues. There is current litigation on these laws, but the claims under it are under Section 7 of the Charter and Section 15 of the Charter, not Section 2B. So again, I think that this Liberal MP is just throwing at me every single gotcha cause that he can think of and trying to get me to give my personal opinion on it when I'm here to testify about particular pieces of legislation and the constitutional protections of freedom of expression. Then the MP gave me a few hypotheticals and he asked, should you be allowed to say these things? Here is the clip.
My question to you, though, is if we have very broad limits to what people can say or not say, do we not start to see that there becomes risk to other people's safety and security? So, for example, if somebody were to say that, oh, all Muslims are terrorists and we need to worry about them, or all Jews support genocide, we should be worried about that, or all Chinese people are complicit with the CCP, or making nonsense statements like that, which can start to undermine people's safety and security, do you think that we should limit that, or do you think that's okay?
That's not limited currently under the law, even under hate speech law. That is, the current hate speech law would not prohibit statements like that, as odious as they are.
But that's actually not true, though. But that's simply untrue.
No, it's not untrue.
It's not. So okay. So just to go back. So we will disagree.
It would be incitement.
Okay. So incitement.
Which is a much higher threshold than what you're describing. As terrible as the speech that you're describing is. And it should be permitted. Your position is that should continue to be, that should be permitted. That's not even.
No, but my question to you, should it be permitted?
Government is proposing do it.
My question to you is, should that type of speech be permitted? Is it okay to say those things?
It is not okay to say those things, but it is legal to say those things in Canada.
Okay.
So I foolishly and naively tried to answer this as if he was interested in hearing what I had to say. If I could do this over again, because I was really under the time limit and he was really speaking over me, what I would say is that these statements alone are unlikely to lead to a conviction under the criminal code prohibitions on hate speech, which are sections 319 sub 1 and 319 sub 2 of the criminal code. So those are incitement to hatred and willful promotion of hatred. And I have a lot to say on this, but the MP was not very interested in my answer. What I'd say is that hate speech prohibitions are intended to cover the most extreme types of speech. And under a Supreme Court decision called Whatcott, the speech needs to rise to the level of vilification and detestation. And it names a few what they call hallmarks of hatred. And you know, some of these statements might have some of those hallmarks. For example, suggesting that Muslims are all terrorists could be analogized to the example in Whatcott that all members of a certain group are illegal or unlawful by labeling them liars, cheats, criminals, and thugs. So that's from Whatcott. But under the Ward decision, there needs to be some level of incitement for the hatred standard to be met. Some incitement to harm is always required under either 319(1) or 2. So under 2, to be willful promotion of hatred, you still need to have an incitement to hatred. You need to willfully be promoting other people to hatred. And there's a lot that you need to prove in order to meet that threshold. Under 319 sub 1, that's public incitement to hatred. You need to have the Crown needs to show that the words are likely to lead to a breach of the peace. So I think that these examples without further context would not result in convictions, even though, of course, all of these statements are odious and worthy of us condemning and saying are terrible and stupid and foolish and incorrect. So Whatcott makes it very clear that the vilification and detestation standard filters out expression which, while repugnant and offensive, like those statements, does not incite the level of abhorrence, delegitimization, and rejection that risks discrimination or other harmful effects. So there must be an incitement to harm. And I try to explain this in my answer, but I am, of course, not permitted to continue. What I would say is that, police struggle with this definition because it is so subjective. Now, is it impossible that these words with other context could lead to criminal charges? Perhaps they could. I mean, there would need to be a lot of further context. There would need to be this incitement to harm to convict under 319(1) or 2. Perhaps there could be charges if they were approved by the AG, but I think to even bring a charge, it's likely there would need to be more. I did have a look at case law to try and find some analogies to these hypotheticals after I was asked the question, because I really care about getting things right. So I looked up some cases. I've read these cases before, but I wanted to look again. And the closest I could find to a successful conviction was a 2001 case called R. and Harding. And Harding did say something close to, quote, all Muslims are terrorists, which of course is not true and is a very stupid and repugnant thing to say. But Harding said a whole lot more than that. I mean, he compared Muslims to animals. He suggested there was a secret conspiracy for Muslims to take over Canada. He says that they are a threat to our children, among other awful things. And he was convicted of willful promotion of hatred. But as I said, the facts were a lot more extreme. It is really hard to answer a hypothetical on the spot like this. And I do think without more context, there wouldn't be a successful conviction of these statements in the hypotheticals. I would have liked the opportunity to explain this, but I kept getting cut off since he was not actually interested in my answer. I also think that the fact that the definition of hatred under the case law and the proposed definition in Bill C63, the fact that it's so subjective that we don't really know what would happen in these hypotheticals, that is a big problem. We should know what the law is. And when you criminalize speech on a subjective standard, there will be a chilling effect. And this MP seems to be suggesting that his government actually wants to go even further than C63 is proposing. Look, I am not a partisan. I appeared at this committee by invitation to talk about freedom of expression. But the government member of parliament just wanted to have a weird, meaningless exchange on identity politics to score points against me for some reason. It was really disgraceful. And I will admit that I was upset all night. I had blocked off this time to do this committee appearance until 6:30 at night. I was supposed to be carving pumpkins with my kids. And after this committee appearance, I was so upset that I actually couldn't do that. It ruined my night. And now we have uncarved pumpkins for Halloween. It makes me really sad. These are not serious people. They are not curious about the foundations of this right or the role it plays in democracy. And their lack of interest in the right to free speech is why this federal Trudeau government has advanced some of the most censorious pieces of legislation in modern Canadian history, like C11, C18, and C63. Just for further context, because a lot of people have asked me who the MP was. I mean, you can see who he was. I've posted the clips. But I don't want to have, a partisan exchange with this guy. But I actually didn't know who he was other than I had heard of him because he'd had this exchange on Twitter with a journalist. The journalist had criticized something the government was doing, and he replied, "Your paper wouldn't even be in business were it not for the subsidies that the government you hate put in place." And then he went on to say, "which pays your salary." I mean, suggesting what? That the government pays journalists salaries, and so the journalists should not be able to criticize the government. This is part of the whole issue that we are all concerned about, and it really shows the thinking of where he's coming from and why he wanted to attack me so disgracefully. I don't know how I should have responded to this exchange. I was frankly shell-shocked. I did my best without knowing to expect that I was going to be subject to partisan attacks. I'm not a politician or a partisan. And I naively thought that the government and this committee cared about my answers to these questions. I'm actually going to send all of the members of the committee, including the government members, a copy of my new book on free speech when it comes out in December. If you want a copy of that book as well, you can sign up at the ccf.ca/free speech in Canada. The first 10 people to sign up will get a free copy, a free electronic copy of the book. It will also be available in print, but we're going to be giving out the electronic copy as well. We're going to price the book at a really affordable level. It's a really short introductory guide to the right to freedom of expression. So let me know what you thought of the committee about these exchanges I had with this MP. I could really use a pick-me-up. I'm being honest and vulnerable here. Like, I was pretty sad about what happened. So please be nice to me. I had a hard evening. Okay, that's all for this update. Thanks for watching, and let's keep fighting for freedom in Canada.